Okay, I'm going to show you on this video how to use an Excel spreadsheet to generate a graph of two different sets of data. So Excel is available to you for free as a student, and it can be found in my London District Catholic School Board homepage, I guess that's called, with the waffle. But before we get there, before we go into that, I want to just talk to you a little bit about uh, the data that I'm going to use. So I'm using the data from about our planets, and the two I'm going to look at are the orbital period and the orbital velocity. Now, this actually was done, this graph was generated in this content section. And so I'm going to really show you how to generate a graph that is very similar to this. So to start with, let's go back to our home page here, and you're going to click on the waffle. And in the waffle, you're going to see Excel. Click on Excel, open it. You're going to start a new blank workbook. Okay, and from this workbook, it's just not good to work with the web version. It is best to do a desktop version. Uh, So on the menu here, click on editing down button and you see there's something that says open in desktop app. Please select that one. Okay, and I'm going to just switch my screen here to that. Okay, so there it is, the screen. So I don't have the data saved, but I am going to give myself some space here. I'll just very quickly enter this data. So it's, sorry. The planets, the sets of data I'm looking at are the orbital period, which is in days, really, really, really important to include units. And then orbital velocity, which is in kilometers per second. Okay, so now we just go through and we add our planets here. You don't even need to add the planets, but it does help you keep organized. So take the minute or so it takes to enter this, and let's get going here. Jupiter. Oops. Uranus, Neptune. Let me double check. 1, 2, 6, 7, 8. Good. I got the 8. And now I go to orbital periods. This is where it becomes really, I'm just reading the data. It becomes really important to make sure you are recording the correct data. Okay. Mars, 687 days, 4,000 and a little for Jupiter. Saturn, 10,000. Again, I'm double checking, triple checking, making sure my numbers I'm entering are correct. There we go, there's a typo. Okay, so I'm just reviewing this. Yep, my data looks correct. Orbital velocity. So the same thing, I'm just entering the data that is in the table. Jupiter. Okay, I'm just double checking right now. So Neptune, 5.4, 6.8, 9.7. Yep, looks good. Okay, so from this site, or so from the entering this data on this workbook, you're going to click on the orbital period or whatever your data is in this first column, second column, B column, and do not go to that little box down there with this small x. You want that looks like the cross. Um, Thicker X, and click on the center of that box, and then you pull down, it goes gray. Keep holding down your mouse, you click it over, and you've selected this whole area, the whole area, including the names. That is important. You're then going to go to insert, and you don't want to go to a bar graph right off. You actually have to go to charts and go to um, a scatter graph first. And it does it like that, like in seconds. It was so fast. So um, this graph is set up already quite nicely. It does have points, which we're going to change that to the bar graph idea. The name, the title is not great, and it actually doesn't even have any axis titles. But I want to talk to you first about if when you plot Excel generates your graph, you're going, okay, I'm going to look at this. I see my y-axis is representing the orbital velocity. Those are orbital velocities. I can tell because it goes up to 60 here. So I know that it's those points in there. On the x-axis, it goes up to 60,000. So I know that that's the orbital period. And that actually is the way that I want this to be represented is with the orbital periods uh, in the x-axis. So what if though you end up generating your graph and it's not set up with the instructions or with the proper set of points in the x-axis? So going from chart design, you then go to select data. So I'm just going to play around and I'm going to reverse them, and then I'm actually going to reverse them back. So you click on, I can show you that to you again, chart design, which is auto. Okay, there was some problems with some of the uh, pop-up menus or menus that Excel uses showing up on the original video I made. So the only way I could do this is with a whole screen capture, and but the bottom line is I can show you how you actually change your X and Y values. So you get to see a little bit of a review here. I'm going to first, I have to create my graph, which is scatter. I know you already seen this, and I have this graph like this. So obviously I can change my I can add some titles. I can change my heading here, my title, actually main title, my titles of my x-axis, but that's not what this little clip is about. This little clip is about if, in this case, I have my orbital period as my x-axis and my orbital velocity as my y-axis, which actually is correct. That's the way you want to present this data. Let's say, well, actually, you know, it's not the way I want it. I want it the other way around. I want the orbital velocity to be on my x-axis and the orbital period to be on my y. So as in the other video, it showed me selecting the data, but this is the actual table that wasn't coming up. So when you go back, I'll just do that again. So go up to chart design and it'll already be selected if you've highlighted your table, and then you select data. Okay, this little button right here, select data. And with in this little pop-up menu here, um, you there's some things don't worry about the chart data range. Don't worry about switch row column. I want you to go into edit, and I want you to skip series name. That's actually the title of it, but we'll change that later on. Well, what's really important is to look at series X values. So if I take that series X values, I know that that is representing right here, and that's actually representing orbital period. I don't want that, so I delete that. I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to go over to my orbital velocity, and highlight the very first number at the top of my table. It's really important you do not select that, or some weird things come up. Select the first um, number in that column, and then just like we've done in the past, I want you to drag that down, and what it's done is it actually has selected all of those values to now be your x-axis, and then you don't need to touch anything. You just highlight now into the series Y values. You delete the series Y values. Now what do I want for my Y axis? Well, I want my orbital period. So you go over here and you select that first box, you drag it down, and it now automatically has selected all of that data for your y-axis. I select OK, and then I select OK again, and now you can see that on my y-axis, I can tell by the numbers, by how big they get up to, that this is orbital period, and my x-axis is orbital velocity. Okay, so that's a table that was missing. Hope that helps you out. Y. Okay, so now we have to tweak this and make this according to the instructions that I've given you on good graph presentations. And you've learned this quite a bit through your academic time. So you go, in the case of Excel, you go to the positive um, button right here, which is right to the right of the graph, and you click on that. And I've got axis, and I've got axis title, and what's really cool, I don't know if you see this, when you scroll over it, it actually shows it up on um, on your graph, which is like, okay, that's perfect. So I want to click on axis title because I know I need to include titles. And I also have here chart title, which remember I set that as compare. The rest of the stuff I don't need. I can take off my grid lines if I want. I can leave them on. I can have boxes, and you can play around with that if you want to. But I can just leave it with. Why don't I leave it with none? I'll leave it with none. Okay, so I've set this up and for the um, editing, that the way you want to, how you want to present a really good uh, graph. Okay, so here in the axis title, I just select it and I backspace in this case, or delete. And what did I have? What is on the y-axis? Well, if you're stuck, you can always look at the numbers and you say, yeah, those are those numbers. And so that is orbital velocity. So you just type this out, velocity, and always, always, always include units. I can't emphasize the importance of that. So I'm just checking my spelling, orbital velocity, that's in the y-axis, and it's kilometers per second. And on the x-axis is the orbital period. So I just select in that box, I delete what's there, and I write orbital, make that clear for you, period. Really important that I have the units. For my title, it's really important for you to have a nice detailed title. You can, I was going to say, I mean, you can write too much as you could fill the whole page, but really be thorough on this. I typically am not going to take marks off because your title is too long. To let you know what you start off with when you're writing this title, is that you are comparing orbital velocity and orbital period. So you actually read it from the y-axis versus the x-axis. So this is the way would look like. So you would go, what's my y-axis? It's orbital velocity. And again, you would just enter your data, or your whatever your points are that you are graphing. You can include the units here, or you don't have to, because you have included now the units in the axis titles. So orbital velocity versus, so this is my y-axis versus my x-axis, which is my orbital period. And then you have to say, okay, I've described very briefly what this graph is about. But if I was to pull someone, off the street and say, hey, what's this mean? Well, it's orbital velocity versus orbital period. For what? Well, it's for our, 8 planets blah, 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 blah in our solar system. So it gives more information to say, this is what this data is about. Maybe you want to even include what the planets are. Although, the 8 planets is pretty known, but you could include that and there's no harm in that. So this title, again, I didn't totally write it out because I'm telling you what you need to include. I'll leave that to you for you to write out. I don't want you to just copy down what I have written here. And of course, your data point names are going to be different because you're going to be graphing something different. Okay, I'm getting really, really close. It's starting to look really good, but I still have it as these points. So now's the time that you get to switch it to looking like uh, the graph that I showed you originally from that content section. So you have to be selected in the graph to get this chart design information up. But one of the selections over here is change chart type. So I can go now and I can say, well, maybe I want to have it as a line. Sure, you can make it a line graph. That's pretty good. That makes it really easy to interpret. So what would my interpretation be of this? As the orbital period increases, the orbital velocity decreases. That's a good interpretation of that graph. Maybe you want to research about, I wonder why that happens. If you wanted to have something different, like I do indicate that create a bar graph, it actually goes under column, and you select this first box here. Whoops, and you select OK, and now you're seeing the graph that is very similar to the one I originally shown you. So there you go. That's how you generate a graph, and you would save this document file, save a copy is what it's saying. And I'm going to explain to you why it's saying save a copy. Because if you now go back to your web browser one, so I'm just going to switch my screen here. So I'm going to go, now I'm back to my, give me a minute here, my web browser one, and I say resume editing here. Look what happens. Oh, my graph didn't come up as let me just double check, go back. Oh, there it came. It just took a little bit of time so the desktop version is communicating to the web version, and it just took a little bit of time. So now I'm in my web version. Just let me double check. Yep, you've got that. I'm in my web version, and now I can go to my file and I can go to save as and save it, and then I will attach this when I hand it in for the assignment. So that is how you use Excel to generate graphs. I hope after you see this and you get used to it, that you like never go back to doing it by hand. There's so many other things you can do with these graphs in interpreting them, but this is a really good start for you. Okay, that's it.